You are listening to the Run the Rack Outdoors podcast, where we take an all-in, leave no doubt approach to all things adventure hunting. From the big woods to the high country. How about that? Let's learn together as we discuss with our expert guests on what it takes to be successful in the backcountry. I'm your host, Weston Homa. Let's get into it. All right, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Run the Rack Outdoors podcast. This week, I got on Robby Denning. And if you've ever looked into anything about hunting mule deer in the West, I'm sure this guy's name's popped up. So Robby is an author. He's written 2 books on mule deer titled Hunting Big Mule Deer, How to Take the Best Buck of Your Life, and Hunting Mule Deer, The Stories. So I've read both those books, and it was really cool chopping it up with him. He's another really knowledgeable guy in the industry, and I've read those books, taken notes on those books, and I got to pick his brain as we kind of go through different parts of each one of them. So Robby is a really busy guy. We were kind of pressed for time here, so this is a shorter episode, but I feel like we really jam-packed like a lot of good information in the 40 or 50 minutes I had him. So really appreciate you hopping on, Robby. He's just one of those guys that has like a lot of good like energy, and I feel like we just had a really good back and forth. So hope you guys enjoy this episode. As the time of this recording, I'm probably going to be about 2 weeks out, or a little less than 2 weeks before I leave for Colorado high country mule deer, and then I do that for first half September, and then I bomb to Idaho and hunt the elk rut. So 2 Western tags this year, most September off. So stoked. It's pretty much all my work vacation this year. Just to recap, though, from the 100-miler, because that's just what happened here. I'm about a week out from that. It took me a few days to, like, kind of feel normal again. It wasn't until I got, like, a really good long night's sleep to kind of feel like I could critically think again. Body, though, felt really good just a day or two after. I felt like I could run again, but it's this knee. This knee is kind of what took me out there. We'll see. I got an MRI this morning. I'm recording this. It's Sunday evening, and just hoping for the best. That's all we can do, because I got a lot of mountains to climb and critters to chase this September. Got this brace on that seems to help, and just gonna rest up the lower body. Probably need it anyway after running 80 miles. So that's what's going on in my world. The last order of business here, though, I have to do the Mountain Tough giveaway. And I'm well overdue for this. So I appreciate everybody leaving ratings and reviews. I'm going to do a random number generator here and pull open my spreadsheet as well. 18. So that is Howie Miller. And I've talked to Howie a few times. So Howie, if you're listening, I will need to reach out to you, get your email, and you are the winner of the 1-year free Mountain Tough giveaway. So Howie also, I know, bought a hat, so that got him more entries there. And there you go, man. You got 1 free year to Mountain Tough, so that's awesome. I'll get in touch with you, dude. Congrats. Again, thanks for everybody who participated in that. And that's all the business I have here. Let's have another great week, everybody. Let's leave no doubt. Let's work as hard as we can, and let's run the rack. All right, enjoy this one with Robby Denning. Go Hunt has a single purpose: make it easier for hunters to get into the field. Hunting tags are only getting harder to obtain, and Go Hunt is a research platform helping navigate the ins and outs of drawing tags and researching hunts across the West. I've had a Go Hunt membership for years now, and I'm a big fan of the articles written on there by Brady and Trail. The content is next level stuff that has helped me a ton. From animal behavior to archery, they are sharing all the nuggets. I also love the hunt films on YouTube. They are extremely inspirational, and they'll make you want to get out in the mountains ASAP. Check out the Go Hunt Gear Shop, where they have everything you need for this coming hunting season. Use the code RACK, that's R-A-C-K, for 10% off eligible items in the shop. And you can use the code RACK for $50 in-shop credit when you join as an insider. So sign up for a membership and immediately get $50 back toward hunting gear. Check it out. You won't regret it. Mountain Tough produces industry-leading functional fitness programming tested and proven by backcountry hunters and mountain athletes. Mountain Tough's programming allows users to train at home, at the gym, or on the go. These videos are like having a personal trainer right there with you every workout, wherever you are. Guys, I've been rocking the Mountain Tough workouts this past summer. I've been doing the mountain strength workouts as I'm putting on a ton of miles prepping for my 100-mile ultramarathon. This way, I'm going to be totally ready for hunting season once September comes around. There's also so much more video content on the app, including nutrition, yoga, mental health, and one of my personal favorites is the daily mobility. Use code RACK for 1 free month on the app. That's RACK, R-A-C-K, for 1 entire free month to try it out. Give it a look, and let's get Mountain Tough. The mule deer master, big buck killer, owner, operator of Rock Slide, written 2 books about mule deer. I don't know if I'm missing anything else, but yeah, Robby, how we doing? Welcome to the show.
Hey, good, man. I appreciate the intro. No, you didn't miss anything. Other than, man, I think I've done about 300 different blogs on mule deer. I think I'm pushing 300 podcasts here between hosting our own podcast and then being on podcasts like yours. So yeah, I've been yakking about mule deer for 20 years. I just love it. There's probably some people that are getting tired of me, but I appreciate you having me on. I really do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm stoked to get you on. Yeah, Rockcast, great, another great podcast for just diving into Western hunting. If you're somebody like me from back east who's trying to figure some things out, yeah, Robby is a great resource, ton of experience, and get some great guests on too. So, Robby, I know I don't have you for too long, but I've read both your books. I got them right in front of me. I got them tabbed. I got notes taken on
Yeah, you
them.
do.
I love. I've found that's been the biggest thing for me coming out west, like just learning more about the animal. And it's great to shoot your bow. It's great to get fit. It's great to dive into gear, but that's been the biggest thing for me, just learning outside of actually doing the thing, out there learning
Yeah.
and experience, just learning the animal. So again, these books are great if people want to check them out, and we're gonna dive into them today.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. A couple of the joys of my life right there in front of you. I love writing. I went to college to be a writer, and I just love to connect that way. And I'm a big reader too, and I think you learn at a deep level when you read. Love the YouTube videos and hunt films and stuff like that. A lot of times that's just entertainment. If I can get into a book, even reading a story, and I can kind of immerse myself in that. Those are things I take to the woods. I remember those stories for years. I remember what the guy said, you know, things that he taught me. It's just how I learn.
Yeah, I love it. I love it in the sense of reading. I always got a book in front of me. Like whatever I'm working towards next, I like having a book and spending like 10 minutes a day reading it. And it's kind of like my daily dose of like keeping my goal in front of me. For example, I'm doing this. I love endurance running, and I'm running this 100-mile ultra here in a couple
All
days.
right.
I've been reading a book about this famous ultra runner, Scott Jurek, every day a little bit, and it's kind of been my main focus. And the next book up is David Long's book about mule deer. And as soon as I get
The
this race
Edge.
done, it's my
Dude,
buddy just
he's
sent
got
to
he's
me. I
got
forget.
2 of them. He's got hunting
I don't.
public land mule deer, the
That's
bottom
it.
line. That's a
That's
great
it.
one too. It really is. But dude, if you got to get the edge, him and Mike Duplan wrote
Okay.
it together. And the reason I say that is because you mentioned your Colorado archery hunt, and that's got a lot of that in there. It's probably one of the best archery books written out there because David was a rifle hunter, and then he switched over to archery, and it was kind of his journey of going from a great rifle hunter, but having to break everything back down to become a great bow hunter. And I highly recommend that book. I did a review on it on the Rock blog. If you go back on our old blog, just type in David Long, The Edge. You'll see it in there. It's still available. I see him advertising it occasionally on Instagram. Highly recommend that one. The one you have is a good one too, but it's more kind of a rifle background. You need to read them both. But if you're headed to Colorado, get The Edge.
Okay. I'm adding it to the list. All right. Let's dive into your stuff. So I have, a few notes here in front of me. I think I can really help the guys out of state, whether they're coming out for the first time or maybe they're just a few years in the game. So first thing people want to do is plan a mule deer hunt. Obviously, they're going to go on, and we're kind of past application season, But right
Mhm.
now, it's kind of fun with these leftover tags coming out, secondary draw, things like that. Like Colorado's going through one right now. I'm pretty sure Idaho, at the time of this recording, is having they just came out with their list today, and I think
Mhm.
on Thursday they go on sale. But anyway, so there's still opportunities possibly by the time this drops to get a tag. But even for next year, things like that. Planning a mule deer hunt. So you mentioned a part in, I think it's in the stories, about deer statistics you are concerned with and you're not so much concerned with. And I'm a
Mhm.
big fan of Go Hunt. They have all the statistics like consolidated in there. You can click on the unit, look at harvest rates, buck doe, um, ratios, things like that. So wanted to just start there. What are some statistics that you are concerned with and maybe some you're not so concerned with in a particular
Thing I
unit?
always remember about statistics and mapping software and Boone and Crockett record books is we're all looking at the same thing. Everybody gets the statistics. And so I just try to remember that this isn't a secret. Other people are looking at it. And I have a joke out here with all my big buck hunting friends. We all end up in the same place. We really do. I can know of a guy who's a big buck hunter, never met him. And it never fails. We end up on the same mountain. And it's fine. And part of it is because of the statistics. They kind of lead you to the same place. But to answer your question, um, buck to doe ratio is important to me. I really want to try to hunt where there's more than 20 bucks per 100 does. I'd love to hunt where there's 35, 40 bucks per 100 does. You can really tell when there's that kind of a buck to doe ratio. But just the way it is with their odds now and everything, people, again, the stats, people are looking at that. Those tags are getting harder and harder to get. And so, for example, this year, all my public land tags that I'm hunting, right now, if hunting season was open, I'm going where I've been scouting. I'm probably averaging about 22 to 25 bucks per 100 does. Those kind of units can grow big bucks still. They're just not as widely available. There won't be as many of them coming up through the age class. You got to work harder. But again, at least you can get a tag. You can't kill one if you can't get a tag. That's a given. The other statistic I like is percentage of 4-point bucks in the harvest. There's only 2 states that publish it outright. Now, you may be able to call the biologist and get it, but it's percentage of 4-point bucks in the harvest. And what I'm looking for is if a unit has 40% of the bucks in the harvest, okay, or more, and it's steady. It can't be 40% one year and 20% in the next year. That could indicate overharvest. It can be higher. It can go 40, and the next year be 50. That means there's plenty of bucks getting into the upper age classes. And from what we know from tooth aging mule deer out here in the West, we used to think all these giant bucks were 10 years old and 9 years old, and they were all grandpas. Man, some of them are, but we're finding out a lot of these big bucks are 4 to 6 years old. They're just genetic freaks, is what it is. And if they're going to be big, they get big young. They usually have those characteristics. And yeah, they're probably even bigger when they're 8 and stuff like that, but not necessarily. And so how that ties to that statistic, if 40% of the bucks in the harvest are 4 points, you've got an aged class there. You've got bucks that are getting into that 3, 4, 5 years old age. And once they get to there, they start to change. I've noticed that in my first book that you've got there, I even said that they almost act like a different species. I call a big buck a different species. There you go. Hunting big mule deer, how to take the best buck of your life. I break that down in there because they act differently. They're not as visible. They're very deliberate in how they move. And let's just face it, young mule deer, 2, 3-year-old mule deer, they're dumb. I never argue with whitetail hunters when they say mule deer are dumb. I'm just like, yeah, but you probably haven't hunted the big ones because they do change when they get to like 4 and 5 years old. They become very, very secretive, they're much more nocturnal. They're just all these things in their favor that makes them very hard to detect. So by looking at 40% of the bucks in the harvest, I know that I'm getting some bucks to that 2, 3, 4-year-old range, and there's going to be some of them that get old enough they start to hide. They get wise to the ways of the hunter, and so that's why I like that statistic. Um, population numbers, if you can nail down a population number for a deer herd, and it's historical, and if you go way back, it's kind of depressing. Some of these mule deer herds, let's just say, for example, they had 10,000 mule deer, and some of these places now they got 3,000. Yeah, it's kind of a bummer. But even at those lower numbers, you can still grow big mule deer. And I'm assuming that's why you wanted me on the podcast. We're talking about mature mule deer, big mule deer. That's the word I use. Um, that a low population of mule deer can still have 40% of the bucks more than 4 point, still can have more than 25 bucks per 100 does. All those things can be happening. There's just not going to be as many deer on the landscape. And in some places, under some conditions, having a low deer population can grow even bigger bucks because there's less competition for the resources. That's very controversial out here. We're got a lot of guys that really want big deer populations. Man, I get it. There's nothing more fun than driving up the county road. There's a buck, there's a buck, there's a buck. That's all great. But sometimes that's not when you're growing the very best bucks. And when we come off of these really hard winters, we'll see that we have a very low deer population, but just some hammers in the herd. Idaho last year, the biggest buck that it produced was just an OTC buck in just a regular place. But we're coming off of a really hard winter with depressed mule deer herds. And so back to the stat population, I'll look at it, try to look at it historical, just what is it trending? But I don't get too hung up on it unless just bad things are happening. The population is shrinking year after year. We don't have good age class on the bucks. You don't have. Let's talk about the next stat. Fawn recruitment, percentage of fawns that are being recruited into their first year. If you have 70% of your fawns that were born in May still alive in January, you can grow a mule deer herd. You really can. So if that number dips below that, say you're getting 35-40% fawn recruitment. We're seeing that in some Nevada units now due to drought. And sure enough, 4 years later, there's hardly any tags in the units. The buck numbers are low. Everything is going against them when that number's low. But that's something that I'll pay attention to too. So that off the top of my head, without looking at my book again, because it's been a couple of years since I wrote that, that'd be kind of the 3 or 4 statistics that I would look at.
Yeah, and these things are state to state, might depend on how much digging you have to look into, and it might not be just specific to your unit. It might be like a whole deer region that the biologists, for whatever year or for whatever reason that year when they did the study, they kind of broke it up. But you can kind of you can definitely find these things. Like Colorado does put out a ton of good information. Idaho, I remember digging a little bit for it, but I definitely got it. I remember calling Fish and Game offices, just talking to people. And yeah, these are all things that can definitely be looked into. Just might have to do your looking a little bit.
You bet. But remember, your boots on the ground is your best information.
Yeah.
You got to start with all the stuff. You definitely got to do the satellite mapping. I use Onyx. Go Hunt. You mentioned them. They have a good mapping system. All that stuff you've got to use. But at the end of the day, getting into the country and figuring out where the deer are is the money. That's where you got to be. I think the statistics keep me from going to really crappy places.
Yep. And we'll just segue into kind of what I want to talk about next. And it is maybe when you're getting into that e-scouting part. So you have a section, I think it's in How to Take the Best Buck of Your Life, about feed. And then also I wanted to mention something that I read in Mike Eastman's book, Hunting High Country Mule Deer. Is that what it is?
You got it. Yep,
I wanted to talk about this because it was something I've been doing recently with my e-scouting for my Colorado unit is escape routes. So he talks about, there's a good section in there where he talks about that. And it's like, you have these massive big basins and some of them might be like greened up and like look really good. But, deer have to find a way to get out of areas when they're super skittish. So I wanted to pick your brain on, I guess I'm being a bad podcast host. I kind of said 2 things there, but we'll just dive right into what you're looking for e-scouting, escape routes. And I know you have that part where you talked about feed. You know what it kind of looks like, but it's not like you can, there's not some specific genus and species. What are your thoughts there?
Although we've solved that a little bit since then. It's on the Rockcast. I think it's called Mule Deer on the Edge. It was released about a year ago, and it was with a habitat biologist from Wyoming. His name is Luke Schultz. And we started the conversation of identifying plant types in that. And then I had him back on this year, and he went full throttle into the types of plant, genus, species, all that stuff that you just named. If you go to the rockslide.com, and go to the Mule Deer Forum, it's pinned at the top of the Mule Deer Forum. You'll see it in there, and it's a link to that podcast. But even better, Luke went in because he's a member on Rockslide, and he put all the pictures up of the plants that you want to be looking for. Okay, so it's out there now.
I will
We
be
solved
all
that.
over this. Okay, I wrote
There
that
you
down.
go, buddy.
All right.
There you go. Yeah, jump on that. But back to what you were asking. I'm a light e-scouter. I probably don't spend more than 3 hours a year e-scouting. Usually for e-scouting, for me, the big thing is access. How am I going to get in and out of the country? And is there deer feed? It's just like humans. You can't put humans where there's no grocery stores. They have to get feed, and they have to get it every day. It's got little tiny pockets of green, and you can be like, oh, maybe a deer lives up there. No, probably not. You got to get to where there's abundant feed. They don't eat rocks. That's what I try to tell people. And so a lot of times on e-scouting, I'm looking for the color green. That's really what I'm looking for. And escape routes, they kind of take care of themselves. Big mule deer live in rough country. And so when I'm e-scouting, I look for the feed, and I need to know a little bit about where I'm scouting. There's going to be summer range in a lot of those units over there that the deer are only going to be above the bucks are only going to be above 7,500 feet during hunting season. That's just the rule. There may be the lone bruiser down on some low flat in a canyon, but you're not going to be able to find him. Somebody's going to have to tell you about him that was out riding the cattle fence, and hey man, this great big thing stood up and had bushes growing out of its head. That's how you find those bucks. But you got to go to where you can look at the most deer. So I have to know that when I'm e-scouting. Like, what can I expect in this mountain range? Call the biologist. Oh, yeah, our deer are all summer high, above 7,500 feet. That's where you got to go. So I'm on e-scouting. I'm looking for the green country that's above that. And then semi-rocky. It's not that you don't want rocks. Big bucks like rough country, and it's typically semi-rocky country. And it's going to not be all timber, and it's not going to be all wide open. There may be wide open places in it, but they're not just going to lay out there and bake in the sun in the summer. They're no different than us. They're looking for shade. The biggest bucks, I call them vampires because they hardly go in the sun. They'll let the sun touch them a little bit in the morning, and then they spend the day getting away from the sun, even if that's just moving around a bedding tree. As the sun moves around the sky, they move around the tree to get away from it. And so it's got to have cover in it too. That's where I'm going with all that. So green, rough, semi-rocky, with I'm saying timber, using that as a general word for all cover. That could be quake and aspen, mountain mahogany. I was just scouting the other day, and all the bucks were in the mountain mahogany, but that's the type of cover that grows in that range. And it's got to have a combination of all that. And then if I have to put a number out there, I don't think a mule deer spends much time on slopes that are under 20 degrees. They may walk across a flat place, they may feed out on a flat place, but they use those slopes to their advantage. And I think it has to do with thermals, being able to see. There are plenty of deer that live in flat country. Don't get me wrong. But again, we're talking about the numbers here. I call recognizing deer country a technique. It's right up there with glassing, still hunting, all that stuff, because if you can't recognize deer country, you're going to waste a lot of days. No different than if you don't know how to still hunt. You're just going to waste time. Okay. So I think learning your deer country with eyeballs on the mountain, you can do a little bit of it of e-scouting, but if you've seen the mountain they live on and you know that that's what they like, it makes e-scouting so much easier because then you can go look for similar terrain in that unit. You follow me?
I follow you. Yeah, and I love that deer country. I love how Brian Barney talks about it a lot. He calls it Bucky terrain. And
Bucky.
Bucky, that's it.
Yep,
and
you got
it really hit me a couple years ago. So I went out, I had a mule deer tag Colorado in 2020. Wait, what year? 2023. That was the deer photo contest. So I went out there. That was late October, the second rifle season, late October, beginning of November. But I had another week of vacation to burn, and I was like, why not go scout my deer unit? Just solo, spend a week out there in Colorado, just scout. And it was a little bit of a challenge because I know deer are more so up in the high country versus where they might be in late October or early November. But I I messaged Brian Barney about like that trip, like things to look for, and he talked a lot about this Bucky terrain, and that's just kind of when things started clicking for me. Like I spent a few days kind of around like that 8 or 9,000 feet, and then I spent a couple other days in the high country and got on some deer that were there at that time, and it was just interesting to watch them do the things you're saying in these basins where they have these little things, the cover, the feed, and I don't know if, and I'm curious your thoughts on like the face of the slope, what might be better or worse, what they like, but it is they following the sun, making it easier for them to come out to feed and get in the shade. Because I'm watching them, and I'm from Pennsylvania, whitetail public land hunter, bed to feed, we got to have that dialed in. When you're watching it in open country, like in the high country in Colorado, it's so interesting because you're watching the whole, watching them bed, watching them feed. The sun is going like around the basin, and they go into the shade and back to bed. And like that's the whole thing. To where, but when I'm in heavily covered Pennsylvania public land, it's all timbered, and you can't really watch that play out. But that's as kind of as simple as they make it, or it can really be that simple. It seemed like. So it was just interesting to watch that. But yeah, back to my question there. Faces of slopes. Maybe it varies time of year. I don't know. Early
I
season, since
just I just thought of something as you were saying that. You mentioned Brian Barney. He's a friend. I've had him on the Rockcast before.
yep,
Not surprised that you reached out to him and tried to help you. He's just that kind of guy. And he's got a lot of films through Eastman, excuse me, and also South Cox. I just had him on a couple of weeks ago.
I listened to that.
People
Yeah, that was great.
Okay, you listen to that. The next thing you should do is jump over and go look at those guys' films because they show you, they might be kind of tight. They're not trying to give away their mountainside. They don't want people to know where they're hunting usually, but it'll give people a really good visual. You won't know the names of the plants and all that stuff, but neither do the deer. I always joke around. They don't know the names either. But you'll
Right.
get a good visual of what that country looks like. And these guys are hunting mule deer from low to high, so you can look at a lot of different habitats and everything, sagebrush only mule deer, high country mule deer. But that would be something too we should throw out to guys that, watch those films and don't just watch them for the entertainment value, but really get a feel for what kind of country they're in. And a lot of times, they'll say at least which state they're in, because you can look at these films and go, wow, that looks totally different there than where this guy was. Well, that's the varied habitat that mule deer live in the West. The high desert Nevada mule deer are completely different looking country than the high country in Colorado or central Idaho. So something to look at right there. As far as slopes go, do they have a favorite slope? I think the east-facing slopes, on average, grow the best feed. And it's because they get the morning sun, so they get half of the sunlight during the day, but they don't burn off as much as the west-facing slopes and the south-facing slopes. Those get a lot of heat. Mule deer will use them, definitely, especially as they're moving away from the sun. I often see mule deer move from the east side of a slope to the west side of the slope as the sun climbs the sky. Out in the West in big country, before Google Earth and everything, although I'll still do it sometimes. You jump in an airplane and fly over a mountain range, you can get a good feel for the country and stuff like that. And occasionally you'll see deer. And I learned that when I was flying. Like we would see deer on the east-facing slopes, but they're pretty far from them. It's hard to tell, what size of buck they are and everything. But what I would notice is these deer were often leaving the east-facing slope and going over onto the west side. We turn the plane around and come back around the mountain, and wow, there's those bucks right there. They were just on the other side. What are they doing? They're getting away from the sun. But before that sun comes up, they're on those east-facing slopes. A lot of them are. It's not the only place they'll go, but if you just stand back and look, those will be your slopes that are still green later into the fall and everything, because they don't get that hot afternoon heat like the west-facing side does and the south side. So I'm always looking at east-facing slopes. Most of the mountain ranges in the west run north and south. That means the main spine of the mountain is going to have a west-facing slope and an east-facing slope. You follow me there? Okay.
Follow
And
you.
so, yeah. But they can be on any slope. Any slope. I get guys sometimes that are DMing me. They're like, "Hey, so do I look on north-facing slopes for mule deer in the midday?" And I'm like, "Well, you can, but typically north-facing slopes don't grow a lot of feed because they don't get a lot of sun. That sun is what grows those plants that they want." And so what I tell them is that I don't so much focus on the slope as I do, back to our first point, there has to be feed. But then I look on the north side of terrain and the north side of vegetation. So they are in the shade, and the north is going to be the shaded the most throughout the day. So when I'm glassing, I'm looking on the north side of, when I say terrain, maybe a cliff face, and he'll be bedded on that north side of that, maybe in the afternoon, because that's where the shade is. But I don't just go to north-facing slopes, and you'll see why. And when you get out here, they're just covered with timber. Maybe there's deer
Right.
on them. I don't know how to get to them. So that's what I would add about that. And then one more thing that has to do with slopes. It's kind of hard to wrap your mind around this on a podcast, and this isn't my idea. I got it from Dwayne Adams, one of the best guides out there for years. And once he said it, it just went off in my head. It's like, he is so right. In the mornings, when the sun comes up, if the deer are going to be out where the sun is, like I just gave that example of the east-facing slope, and if they're on the top of the spine, they may just jump over on the west side and be shaded. But often it's not quite that black and white. What they'll do is they'll move to the northwest side of the slope, because in the morning in the northern hemisphere the sun is in the east and southeast sky. So where is it not? In the north and the western sky. Well, the northwest slopes still get enough sun in the later part of the day, but they have a little northern aspect. They don't get burned off. It still has pretty good feed. So in the morning, watch for those bucks to be moving to northwest slopes. And this is the part that's hard to wrap your mind around. That means you're going to be glassing into the sun. You're going to be looking into the shadows, so therefore the sun is in front of you. But once Dwayne Adams clarified that, I knew he was right just sitting there thinking about it. But as I got out in the mountains and I really paid attention to it, I'm like, man, he's in Arizona, by the way, southern Arizona and northern Arizona. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're in northern Montana. It's the same dynamic. These deer are moving from those east and south slopes on average to the west and definitely the northwest slopes.
Yep, and my mind's just going to the spot. So I was in late October that year in Colorado. So Bucky terrain. I even told Brian about it after the hunt because I got that mule deer behind me there, and it was similar to what a lot of what you're saying. It's like clicking in my head. So two massive north-south running ridges, meaning like they all have and then they all had micro drainages coming off the east and west sides. So these
Yep.
deer loved to just hide in these micro drainages, and then each one of those created a north and south face itself. So easy for them to just crawl into that northwest side and get their shade and whatever they need to do in the morning, but then just come right over and feed. So it just like,
Yep.
to me, it's like if the deer here, they feel tucked away and they have options, like, and all these like folds and little micro drainages in the terrain really felt like, I'm like, okay, I feel like I get what he's saying. It felt very Bucky. Yeah.
Yeah, and if somebody's listening to this and their head is swimming, they're like, wait, northwest, east, south,
I
just
know.
remember this. They're vampires and they're trying to get away from the sun. So when you get out there, I'm talking early season, we get later into the year, it's kind of the opposite. They're looking for the sun. I'm talking cold temperatures.
Right.
But just remember when you get out there, I always be out before sunup. That's when they're you're most likely to catch them in the open. But remember, as it gets warmer and hotter through the morning, look for the shade.
Yep.
That's where they're going.
Okay. Before we wrap up, so that was just scenarios of these rifle tags that I've had. Now this is the first archery tag, and I've definitely been leaning toward archery way more in my hunting career. So high country mule deer, archery tag, early September. I hear a lot of guys talk about when we're spotting and stalking mule deer, the second bed. So a lot of guys like to wait for that second bed. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like glassing up in the basin, watching them, eat, sleep, and then that second bed. So where do we
Sure.
go from there?
I've
Yeah.
stalked dozens and dozens of big mule deer. I've killed 3 of them with my bow. Should have killed about 6 of them, so I'm about 50%. And this is what I've learned. There, there's not a formula. Okay, as humans, we want formulas. 1 + 1 = 2.
Right.
But there are desirable trends. So right now, if I had to pick stalking a mule deer in his first bed or his second bed, Weston says, "Hey, we're on the mountain. You can pick first bed or second bed." Okay, of course, I'm always going to try the second bed, but I don't want to ever just stick to that as a hard rule. One of the biggest bucks I killed with a bow, rifle, anything was because I didn't wait for him to get in his second bed. I was within striking distance of him 1,000 yards when he was, well, let me clarify that. The way the terrain laid, it made it so I could cover the 1,000 yards quickly. Some places you can be 1,000 yards from something and you're 7 hours away from it. So I got to be clear about this. I was 1,000 yards away from him, and he was out feeding, and he fed a little bit longer than usual, and he wasn't in a big hurry, just coming off a big storm. So I knew he had an empty stomach, and he was gonna be moving slowly. And I thought I can cut some of this distance off before this buck beds. I didn't know if I could get him on his feet, but I could cut some of this distance off, and I hauled a over there and got within about 80 yards of him before, just in that, I cut off 920 yards in minutes, and he was still on his feet. He had not bedded yet. Well, now I'm so close to him, I kind of hold the cards, and that if he would have gone to and laid down right there, I would have stalked him. Because I was so close, I wouldn't have lost any time. The problem with the first bed, it's not as predictable. Sometimes they might lay in it for 5 minutes, sometimes they might lay in it for an hour, but they rarely lay in it all day. So you don't have much time. So I cut this down to 80 yards. I'm like, man, I'm holding the cards right now. If he beds down, I've got time to get him. And that's kind of what I was thinking. Well, by the grace of God, he did me one better. He turned and he fed up towards me. He cut off another 15 yards. That was within striking distance, and I was able to kill him on his feet. No bed. No bed. All right. The other buck, stalked him right to his bed. Classic. Spotted him in the morning, waited till 2 or 3 o'clock, got into his second bed, and he stayed there all day, killed him when he got up. Third big buck, cut him off between bed and feed at like 7 o'clock in the morning. He just let his guard down and he let me get in there. This was the broken heart buck that's in that first book, the one I wounded, but then I still found him.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah, so out of those 3 bucks that I've killed, some of my biggest bucks, archery, rifle, muzzleloader, only one of them was killed in the second bed. So do you see where I'm going with all this? Okay.
Yeah.
Now the other 3 bucks that I didn't get off the top of my head that I actually legitimately had in range, either got an arrow off or didn't get an arrow off but should have killed him. One of them was second bed, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I just flat missed him. So that was a second bed buck. The other buck, big blackhorn looking sucker, end of September, hardhorn buck, 190s gross buck. Missed him at 48 yards because I used the wrong pin. Feed to bed. Cut him off going from feed to bed. Okay, and then what was the other? There's one more, I can't remember, but I'm probably 50-50 on first bed, second bed, or feed to bed, or I'm probably 30%, 30%, 30% if I can remember this other one. And so that's why I'm saying there's not really a formula. But yeah, if we go to the mountain and you make me pick one, for sure.
Yeah.
Second bed. The problem with second bed, sometimes you don't get to see where it's at.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because they're getting tucked in for the day. I have lost so many bucks going to their second bed. And if I don't get to see what tree they lay under, man, my odds just went down. I might be able to still hunt through there and find them, but my odds go down so much that the golden ticket is your eyeballs on the deer and never losing sight of the deer while you're stalking. That's what you're trying to do. Doesn't matter if he's on his feet or not. That's what I want to happen.
Yep. So I can tell you're a master of the craft because you're not sitting there saying that there's absolutes. And I find that true, like in a lot of
Oh,
things. Like the people that are like, this is the one and only way every time. This is how it works. And I know that's how our brains are wired. Then
yeah.
that's what we want. We want the 1 + 1 = 2. But when it comes to hunting, especially deer hunting, especially big mule deer hunting, there's no absolutes. There's some rules of thumb, I'm sure, but you just got to take every
Yeah.
scenario for how it is.
Hey, I love that you picked up on that, buddy. And I remember, man, I was a concrete finisher when I was about 19, and I'd been in it for like 5 years. I was okay at it. But I remember these guys that were so good at it. I mean, this was all hand trowel stuff. And I
Yeah.
remember I would ask them, like, how do you make that look so good so fast? They really didn't know. But they would always look at me and say, "Oh, you're spending way too much time on that. Oh, you're trying to get it perfect." All this stuff that as an amateur you just don't pick up on, but when you watch somebody that's really good at it, they keep it pretty simple, and there's not a lot of absolutes, just like what you said. You kind of learn that. I remember that other buck that I was talking about, the sixth one.
Oh, yep.
This is the buck I lost in 2021. It's in that story. It's the last chapter in the stories. That buck. Cut him off, feed to bed. So what is that? Four of them feed to bed, and two of them at their beds. And so
Yep.
that's so as really my odds should really be on feed to bed is what they should be rather than getting them in their bed.
Yeah. If you're thinking about the numbers, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, no, very interesting. All good stuff. Hey, I want to be conscious of your time, Robby. Where can people find you, the podcast, and the books if they want to pick up either one of these books?
Oh, the books are on Amazon. Just type in Robby Denning, Hunting a Big Mule Deer. They'll both come up. Man, I appreciate anybody that would take the time to buy those and read them. And really, I've studied a lot about how people learn. Reading is golden. It's just the way it stimulates our mind, and you'll be able to remember things that you read far more than stuff that you see and stuff like that. So I really do appreciate the mention. But Rockslide's the best place to find me, and that's where I see you, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm on Rockslide. I've never had one bad interaction on there. Like I've just talked to people, pick their brains. In fact, the guy that I'm going mule deer hunting with this year, oh god, it's a long story, but he's from Pennsylvania too, other side of the state. Met him first just talking through Rockslide. And now,
Ah,
fast
cool.
forward, me and this guy talk about mule deer every day. This guy, literally, before we hopped on, I have like 5 messages from him. He was sending me
Yep.
pictures of mule deer in the spot we're going to here in a couple weeks. Just
All right.
he's just
That's a
blowing
good
me
buddy.
up.
Oh, you got it
Yeah,
right there on your phone, man.
yeah, and
Yeah. All
we're
through.
just so pumped. So, but all through Rockslide, like-minded
Yeah.
people,
Cool.
and everybody's been awesome. So, yeah,
Dude, well, I really appreciate that, and but I got to give the shout out to our moderators on Rockslide. They're the ones that keep the peace around there, and it's not a lot of fun to keep the peace, but to make it an inviting place that people feel safe to post. Because if you don't have that going on in the background, you end up with about three bullies dominating your forum, and we've always tried to avoid that. And it's tough because you don't want to censor people, you don't want to
no.
shut them down and everything. But there's this fine line of letting people talk and then letting things get out of hand. And so kudos to all our moderators that are on there. If you see those guys on there, just know that's one of the hardest jobs out there is what those guys do, because they make a lot of enemies trying to keep the peace.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's great. Just don't be. Everybody's been helpful. I've asked questions a ton. I've started threads. People have been really helpful. Just don't be the guy that's like, "Hey, I got this tag in this state in this unit. Where do I go?" You might
Yeah,
get a
yeah,
little.
yeah.
Come on, dude.
I
Yeah.
love it. And dude, that's from the members now. I mean, the members now, they don't put up with that. And the reason why is just so many places got destroyed in the West by posting on the internet. And, I'm guilty of it too. We just weren't careful 10 or 15 years ago. And,
Right.
and maybe we're not even making a difference on Rockslide, but we're like, hey man, no more posting unit numbers. Get on here. Let's talk about the how to. Let's talk about the gear. Move the unit numbers to private conversations, but don't just put something out on Google that's going to be there for years. It's ruining the draw odds. It's burning people's spots. It's a real thing. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. But other than that, yeah, it's great. So there's the books, Rockslide. Check it out. Rockcast. We talked about the podcast. Anything else, Robby, before I let you go?
Oh man, I sure appreciate you having me on here today, and let's do it again, man. After your Colorado hunt, let's jump back on, and I'd love to break it down with you, see how it went. Hopefully, you got a nice mule deer for your efforts, and I'm really excited for you, man.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, man. I'll let you go. Everybody, thanks for listening, and we will catch you on the next one. See ya. Hey, if you liked that episode, please share it with a friend, share it on your story, and give the podcast a rating and a review on wherever you listen. For more of this type of content, you can head over to the YouTube channel and follow along on all the social platforms. Really appreciate it. See you on the mountain.